It's taboo time, folks. You know, rock has always had a rebellious streak. I mean, that's one of the many reasons why we love it, right? Coming up, I'm counting down 6 songs that stirred up controversy and pissed off all the wrong people. These are tracks that got banned, got blacklisted, got canceled by the gatekeepers, the tastemakers, and the goody two-shoes out there. We're at it again with another edition of our Taboo Songs Countdown. And one of these tracks was one of the most talked about SEX-related singles of the 80s. I can't say it on here. Especially after MTV refused to play its video without a disclaimer. But you know, for all the uproar, the song is actually promoting monogamy and committed relationships. And then there's the comeback hit from a squeaky clean former teen heartthrob, and it was banned outright for having a title they thought would hurt the feelings of armed forces families. You gotta trust me, there's no way it could. It's stupid. And there's also the album that people were throwing into bonfires, burning, because it had a cover showing a girl in the men's restroom. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. We're gonna get into it. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, I want to keep this channel going, and I've had a lot of struggles lately. If you'll like, share, and comment on this video, and make sure that you're subscribed or unsubscribe and resubscribe, that'll help me a lot. I would appreciate it. All right, let's get into our countdown. Coming up first on our latest Taboo Songs Countdown, I've got Foreigner, Head Games at number 6. Now, by the late 70s, Foreigner was on the rise. After forming in 1976, the band released their self-titled debut on Atlantic Records in 77, blew up big time, sold more than 4 million copies in the US. This was on the back of 2 top 10 singles, Cold as Ice and Feels Like the First Time. You're as cold as ice. It feels like the first time. Foreigner's next album, Double Vision, that came out in 78, and it was another top 5 LP powered by 2 more big singles, Hot Blooded and that title track. That's why I'm hot-blooded, check it and see. Fill my eyes with that double vision. And then Head Games came out, and this is where things started to get really complicated for the band. Now, the title track, it was written by the band's core songwriting duo of Lou Gramm and Mick Jones, Hall of Famers. Had all the hallmarks of classic Foreigner right there. A massive hook, a powerhouse vocal from Lou Gramm, and a groove that was built to rule rock radio. It got there. It became a solid hit at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100. However, nobody was really talking about the song. Not like they were talking about the Head Games album cover. The artwork depicted a young girl inside a men's bathroom, presumably erasing her phone number from the side of a toilet stall. The girl on the cover is American model and actress Lisa Ann Falk, who would later have roles in movies like Heathers and Say Anything.
God, Veronica, drool much?
The whole concept, it was just supposed to be cheeky and cartoonish, a visual pun on the word head, which was slang for a restroom. Said Lou Gramm, the girl is being naughty, erasing graffiti. She's looking at whoever's buying the album like she's been caught. That was what we were going for. However, the conceptual pun landed very differently with a lot in the public. Parent groups and retailers took one look at the picture and saw a young girl in a men's room, and they thought she looked like she was under duress. The imagery struck many as predatory, and the backlash came in really hot. Stores across the United States refused to stock the album, and radio stations pulled its songs off the air. Lou would say in a quote, "In my local paper in Rochester, there was a huge picture on the front cover showing a big bonfire, and people were throwing Foreigner albums into it. They were saying our visual presentation of the cover was hideous and suggestive, particularly to younger teens. A lot of big radio stations banned us, and we had no airplay at that point." It's amazing the song did as well as it did with that. The controversy became so overwhelming, though, that it threatened to bury the band entirely. Lou in particular later admitted that he got so intense that he seriously considered quitting Foreigner altogether. I guess perception is reality for people, even if it's not the truth. Can't take it anymore. Head Games. All right, coming in at number 5, I got the Shangri-Las with a 1964 classic, Leader of the Pack. That's when I fell for Leader of the Pack. All right, so before the Shangri-Las came along, girl groups were pretty much expected to be, sweet and polished and proper. That's how it was back then. bubbly songs about teenage crushes and holding hands, that kind of stuff. But the Shangri-Las completely blew all that up. These girls came out of Queens, New York and sang about bad boys, tragedy, and teenage heartbreak. They were the first to do it, really. They brought a raw edge and a toughness to radio in a way that no one had heard from a female group before. I mean, they had attitude, and they weren't going to apologize for any of it. Mary Weiss, the group's lead vocalist, grew up in the rough Cambria Heights neighborhood of Queens after losing her father when she was just a baby. Her mother raised her alone, and by Mary's own account, it was a hell of a way to grow up. That toughness came in through every note that she would sing.
What can I do?
The Shangri-Las formed in the early 60s when, as a teenager, Mary started to harmonize with neighborhood friends, twin sisters Marge and Marianne Ganser, along with her older sister Liz. Now, producer George Shadow Morton caught wind of them, and he helped the group record a demo of his song Remember Walking in the Sand, parentheses song. Redbird Records picked it up, and the girls released their first top 10 hit in August of 64.
Oh no. Oh no, 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 no.
A month before that, though, they also recorded another track with George Morton. It was called The Leader of the Pack. The song tells the story of a girl who falls hard for the head of a motorcycle gang. But when her father forbids her from seeing him, she ends the relationship, and then he rides off into the rain and he crashes. Of course, it's dramatic, it's devastating, brilliant. It's brilliant. Said Mary about the song, "I don't think teenage years are all that rosy for a lot of people. They certainly weren't for me. There's a tremendous dark side to that record, which I think teenagers really related to. The studio is a great place to let that pain out."
I'm sorry, I hurt you. The leader of the pack.
Now, notably, the recording features the sound of a real revving Harley Davidson. And since the group was recording at Mirror Sound Studios, which was on the second floor of a Manhattan hotel, producer George Martin actually had to get a little creative about how to capture that sound of that motorcycle. Now, as the story goes, he had someone drive a motorcycle through the lobby of the hotel and up to the floor of the recording studio. Now, I couldn't find exactly how he did that. Did he drive up the stairs or did he take the elevator? There's not really a lot of information on that. But however the bike got up there, the hotel's management was really pissed about it, and they called the police. As Morton tells it, when the officers arrived, they couldn't believe what had happened. They were so stunned, and maybe a little bit amused, that no arrests were actually made. Instead, they did issue a traffic ticket and made them promise to walk the bike out of the hotel so that there wasn't any damage. When Leader of the Pack was released in September 1964, it was unlike anything else on the radio. The song rocketed to #1 in the United States and became the Shangri-Las' signature song. There was a rumor that Billy Joel played piano on this. I don't know if it's true. But while American teens felt every word of it, the British authorities, they weren't having it. In fact, the BBC flat out refused to air Leader of the Pack. At the time, Britain was in the middle of a full-blown moral panic over violent clashes between two youth subcultures. There was the mods, who rode scooters and dressed in sharp Italian suits, and there were the rockers who rode motorcycles and wore leather. The battles between them, they were making headlines, and the last thing BBC officials wanted was to add fuel to the fire by romanticizing a leather-clad motorcycle gang leader in the song. Not that the radio ban slowed the song down, though. Leader of the Pack did almost as well in the UK as it did here in America, going to #3. Mary Weiss found the whole thing pretty entertaining, saying, "I thought it was amusing when they banned Leader of the Pack. When I got off the plane in my leather jacket, though, everyone knew exactly which side I was on." Love it.
I'll never forget him, the leader of the pack.
Make sure to get your Vintage Years collection. I'm wearing 1971 right now. We're running a special deal through the month. You can get yours below or at the link right here. You're going to love them. All right, next up at #4, I've got Disarm by the Smashing Pumpkins. Okay, so if you know anything about Smashing Pumpkins frontman Billy Corgan, you know that his childhood was more than a little rough. After his parents divorced when he was young, he bounced between homes, first with extended family, and then his father, who was a guitarist, was constantly on the road. Billy was largely left in the care of his stepmother, who seemed to have it out for him big time. Billy's been pretty open about the severe physical and emotional abuse that he endured as a child. Billy Corgan described his upbringing as a house of horrors, his quote. But in time, he came to realize that the darkness that he endured, it had a silver lining to it. Said Billy, and I quote, "If I'd had a decent childhood, I definitely wouldn't be doing this." meaning a life of music. The hardships he faced became the driving influences for his music. So the Chicago-based Smashing Pumpkins, they formed in 1988, and they released their debut album, Gish, in 1991. But they really broke out in 1993 with their sophomore LP, Siamese Dream. The album was dripping with personal anguish, and it channeled Corgan's hurting into 3 top 10 alternative chart hits in the U.S. There was Cherub Rock, Today, and Disarm. Now, we've covered Today before. But Disarm might be the most personal thing that Billy Corgan ever put on tape. Written as a direct reckoning with his parents, the song channels all his pent-up childhood rage into something truly hauntingly beautiful. Billy explained that when he wrote the lyrics for the songs on Siamese Dream, he'd just sit down at the typewriter and keep typing until he came to a line that made him cringe with embarrassment. Those lines became the basis for his lyrics. When Billy Corgan sings "The killer in me is the killer in you," he is directly calling out the cycle of abuse. He felt that the rage and the stuff that he went through that his parents projected onto him had infected him, creating a metaphorical killer within his own personality. It was a psychological disease he would have to fight against for the rest of his life. The killer in me is the killer in you. Billy explained it simply, to quote him, "The reason I wrote Disarm was because I didn't have the guts to kill my parents, so I thought I'd get back at them through song." I can't say the word on here, I'll get banned. Disarm was released as a single on February 21st, 1994, though, and it raised eyebrows for a few reasons in the U.S. Nothing too serious. Maybe the most controversial take came from media outlets and religious groups that argued the song was making a statement about abortion because they didn't understand the song. They cited these lyrics that I can't say on here, but I can play them for some reason. But over in the UK, Disarm became a flashpoint for media censorship. It was primarily targeted by the BBC and the producers of the show Top of the Pops. Now, Disarm was effectively banned from the program, and it faced a severe radio blackout due to those lyrics. Officials deemed them too graphic and claimed that they glorify violence against young people. At the time, the nation, it was already on edge because tragically a 2-year-old named James Bulger's life had been taken by 2 10-year-old boys on February 12, 1993, so it was right near that incident. Billy Corgan reiterated that his lyrics had nothing to do with that, and he pushed back against the ban. He insisted the song was about his own childhood trauma. When the BBC asked him to change the offending lyrics, he refused. And despite almost zero mainstream airplay, Disarm climbed to number 11 on the UK charts. Fans found the song anyway. Decades later, Disarm still stands as one of the most emotionally honest songs of the entire 90s. All right, next up at number 3, I've got Paramore with Misery Business. When Paramore burst into the scene in the 2000s, they were something genuinely new. A pop-punk band fronted by a teenage girl with a voice that could peel paint off the walls. The original Paramore lineup consisted of frontwoman Hayley Williams, brothers Josh and Zach Farrow. They were on guitar and drums, and Jason Bynum on guitar and Jeremy Davis on bass. The teenage Tennessee-based band formed in 2004 and released their first album, All We Know Is Falling, in 2005. It would go platinum. In 2007, Paramore followed that up with a second album, Riot, a triple platinum offering, and with it, one of the band's most iconic songs, Misery Business. Hayley wrote the track when she was only 17 alongside guitarist Josh Farrow. Now, the song was inspired by some real-life angsty drama. Hayley Williams would explain that when she was a teenager, she had a crush on Josh, but he already had a girlfriend at the time. Hayley was basically jealous and believed that this other girl was manipulating Josh. Now, later, Hayley began dating Josh, and she took a victory lap with the song Misery Business, putting Josh's ex-girlfriend in the crosshairs. Williams took out all of her frustration, hurt, and fury, and she poured it out into this song. Misery Business painted a picture of a mean girl weaponizing her good looks and getting whatever she wanted. But she also made it clear she was the victor who got the guy in the end. The result was 3.5 minutes of unfiltered angst, boasting lyrics like, well, I'll have to play it because I can't say it. They don't ever matter, people never change. Once a whore, you're nothing more, I'm sorry, that'll never change. Now, this was meant to be an underdog shot at the mean girl bullies across the world, but it struck a nerve with listeners. Misery Business became Paramore's breakthrough hit. It went to number 3 on the alternative charts. It even crossed over to number 26 on the Hot 100, and it even went to number 12 on the Pop Airplay chart. Now, across this band's 20-plus year career, they've released 6 albums, and they've scored several rock chart hits. But Misery Business, it's always been a staple. That is, up until the mid-2010s in the wake of some serious social cultural shifts in America. The line calling the girl in question, that word that I can't say on here, it rhymes with bore, it starts with a W, it drew increasing scrutiny, and critics began labeling Misery Business a toxic SLUT shaming song, which honestly completely missed the point, but it's stupid, the things you can't say on YouTube. I mean, I have to talk about censorship here in Taboo Songs. It's all over this deal. Kind of more of a live and let live. I mean, you know, people are going to live the way they're going to live, and as long as they're not harming each other, just let them live. But, you know, anyway, it's just weird when these things, you can't say certain things, and let's ban this song because I don't like it. Just don't listen to it. Anyway, that's I'll get off my soapbox, but I just think it's so dumb. That's why these Taboo Songs, I like doing these things, because it's like, what have we become where we can't? I remember a little story really quick. Motley Crue came and played my hometown, and like all of the high and mighty, really, really religious zealots of the town like picketed and made trouble. Motley Crue can't play this small town. They're horrible. They're horrible. They're evil. I'm like, just don't go to the concert. I mean, even as a kid, I understood that. Like, just don't go to the concert. You don't want to support it. Don't support it. Don't make it bigger by, again, all of these songs, they become bigger by people making a big deal out of them. I just think it's kind of interesting. Anyway, I'll shut up. All right, so back to the song. So in 2015, Hayley Williams, who was closing in on 30, made it clear that she'd grown up since then and that she no longer related to the lyrics. On a Tumblr post, she said, "Those words were written when I was 17, admittedly from a very narrow-minded perspective. Wasn't really meant to be this big philosophical statement about anything. It was quite literally a page of my diary about a singular moment I experienced as a high schooler." Jump ahead to September of 2018 at a hometown show in Nashville. Paramore played Misery Business live for what they announced would be the last time for a while. Before launching into it, Williams told the crowd, "This is to every bad decision that led us here. This is to all the embarrassing things we might have said, but we owned up to it and we grew."
To every bad decision that led us here.
I mean, it was a moving moment. I get what she's trying to say, but also, don't ban your own song. It immediately ignited a massive debate online about cancel culture, artistic growth, and whether retiring the song was the right thing to do. However, the retirement didn't last as long as people expected. In April 2022, Williams joined Billie Eilish on stage at Coachella for an acoustic version of the track. Though the offending word, the one that rhymes with bore that starts with a W, that was intentionally dropped from the lyrics.
I'm sorry, honey, but I passed it up now. Look this way.
And then when Paramore made their full live comeback in October 2022, Misery Business was back in the set list.
They don't ever matter, people never change.
Williams couldn't help but laugh at the irony, saying that 5 minutes after she got canceled for saying that naughty word in a song, a TikTok changed his mind and decided it was okay. What do you think, though? Was retiring Misery Business the right thing to do? Is this kind of like when Pat Benatar stopped playing Hit Me With Your Best Shot? Sometimes I just think we read way too much into things. It's rock and roll. All right, coming in at number 3, I've got Rick James getting super freaky with Super Freak.
She's a super freak, she's super freaky.
So by the time Rick James sat down to write Super Freak, he was already living the lifestyle that the song really described. James had burst onto the scene in 1978 with his debut album Come Get It and the number 13 hit single You and I. Almost overnight, he became a star, and almost overnight, the excesses started catching up with him.
It's so much fun, yeah, you and I.
James later admitted to spending $1 million in that first year alone on cars and wine and women and booze. And then hard drugs followed. Despite continuing to release successful albums, Rick James would rack up serious debt as he leaned into an anything-goes kind of lifestyle, like a lot of rock stars wanted to do. But through the chaos, the music, it kept coming. In 1981, while finishing up his landmark album Street Songs, Rick James threw together one last track almost as an afterthought. James would say he just wanted to write a silly song, so he started with a bass line layered on guitar, and then he layered on some keyboards. He found a tone on his Oberheim synthesizer that he'd been saving for just the right moment. And that's where Super Freak started to come together, fast and loose. But when Rick James shared the song with Alonzo Miller, the music director of one of LA's biggest stations, Miller told him that there was going to be no way that he would get that song played on any radio station. The lyrics that Rick had written were just too risque for that time. Rick agreed to change things up, and the two of them sat down and rewrote the song to be radio friendly. That spontaneous little silly song became the biggest hit of Rick James's career. Super Freak peaked at number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it helped push Street Songs past 1 million copies sold.
Oh, now, that girl is pretty wild now.
I mean, the song's irresistible groove celebrated a world of uninhibited, do whatever you want kind of fun. Audiences, they absolutely ate it up, mostly because of the groove. The song would become the biggest hit of Rick James's career, although he'd continue to score R&B chart hits throughout the 80s. He also received a songwriter and producer credit on Eddie Murphy's number 2 hit Party All the Time. And of course, then Super Freak was unexpectedly resurrected in 1990 when MC Hammer used the iconic bass line to build his monster hit, You Can't Touch This. Everybody remembers that.
You can't touch this. Can't touch this.
Now, initially uncredited, Rick James filed a suit, and the case settled out of court with James receiving his songwriting credit. Actually, when You Can't Touch This won the Grammy for Best R&B Song in 1991, Rick went home with the hardware. It was his one and only Grammy, and it was won on someone else's song, basically sampling his stuff.
You can't touch this.
But 1991 is the year that would all start to go downhill for Rick James. Already deep into substance abuse, Rick went on a week-long cocaine binge, and with his girlfriend Tanya Hijazi, he kidnapped the 24-year-old Frances Alley. They held her hostage in their home for 6 days, and then they subjected her to some really messed up stuff I can't even talk about here. The details that emerged were very disturbing, and James faced a potential life sentence for charges of kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and again, several things I can't even talk on here. They're so disturbing. Now, Rick was released on bail, but then on November 3rd, 1992, once again under the influence of cocaine, he assaulted music executive Mary Sauger. Rick was ultimately found guilty for both incidents, but he was cleared of another charge. He was sentenced to 5 years at Folsom State Prison, and he got released after serving 2. In the years that followed, more accusations would come forward, very disturbing. And then in August of 2004, Rick James was found dead in his LA home. He died from pulmonary and cardiac failure. So recognizing the dark legacy hanging over Rick James's life and career, where does that leave Super Freak? The song we all thought was about some admittedly freaky good times looks very different when you start digging into Rick James's personal life. A lot of people have taken it off of playlists. They won't play it, a lot of radio stations. The character in the song and the man behind it become pretty hard to untangle. But what do you think of the comments? Do you still listen to Super Freak? Have you heard it on the radio? Or has Rick James's bad behavior ruined it for you? What do you think? Let's talk about it. Okay, for an honorable mention, I've got what has to be the most ridiculous entry into any of our Taboo Songs countdown. We've done like 11 or 12 of these things. I've got 70s squeaky clean teen idol Donny Osmond and his hit, Soldier of Love.
I am willing to fight, 'cause I'm a soldier of love.
And the controversy around this one is absolutely stupid beyond belief. This comeback track went to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1989. And this is when it had been more than a decade since Donny had a top 40 hit on the chart, and also a decade and a half since he'd broken into the top 10 with the 12th and Ever.
Until the 12th and ever.
Said Donny about it, "It was probably the most important record of my life because that's what brought me back. I'd worked for 10 years to get back on the charts because everybody's wrote me off. And even worse, they had to send a blank tape to radio stations with Soldier of Love on it. And everybody loved the song, But they just didn't want his name attached to it because it wouldn't have gotten played if they would have known, but it became a hit. Now, notably, Soldier of Love was also Donny's first top 30 hit in the UK, but the BBC wouldn't have much love for the song a couple of years later during the Gulf War. Get this. When coalition forces deployed to the Middle East in 1991, the BBC assembled a list of songs that they deemed inappropriate for broadcast, out of sensitivity to military families. There were songs like Blondie's Atomic, Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and Pat Benatar's Love is Battlefield.
Atomic.
Don't get me started on how absurd that kind of censorship is, but for some baffling reason, Soldier of Love was also part of that blacklist. And the reasoning? The word soldier in the title, it was going to be upsetting to families with loved ones serving overseas. I mean, did they even bother to read the lyrics or even the title for that matter? I mean, it's a dance pop song about fighting for a romantic relationship. Has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with war or with the military or anything. Donny sings, I'm a soldier of what? Love. The answer is love. Man, it's just dumb. To quote the song's lyrics, you see much deeper when you read between the lines. Maybe the BBC should look a little deeper. I just had to throw this one in there because of just how stupid censorship can get sometimes. Anyway.
I'm a soldier of love.
All right, at number one, I've got a song that I can't really say on here, but it's I Want Your SEX by George Michael. In 1987, George Michael was done being a teen idol. He spent years as one half of Wham, screaming fans following his every move. And that wasn't going to stop anytime soon, let's be honest. But Michael had bigger ambitions. He wanted to be taken seriously as a solo artist. And as he geared up to release his first solo album in October of 87, George Michael decided to come out swinging. On June 1st, 1987, he released the song was also featured in the Eddie Murphy film Beverly Hills Cop 2, whose soundtrack dropped a couple of weeks earlier.
Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop 2.
The title alone was enough to send radio programmers into a full-on hyperventilating panic attack. I mean, it's still that way. You can't really say it on YouTube even. Stations across the United States either banned it outright or restricted it to late night hours only. Even American Top 40 host Casey Kasem, my hero, he refused to say the title on air. He just referred to it simply as the new single by George Michael. And one radio station even re-edited the song and began broadcasting it as I Want Your Love. George Michael's management was furious, saying that in no way, shape, or form would George endorse any edit like that. And of course, they sent a cease and desist. Once again, over the United Kingdom, the BBC refused to air the song before 9 p.m. Even radio producer Trevor Dann famously said of George Michael, you got to be a tosser not to know that that's going to happen. Write a lyric like that, it's not going to get played on Radio 1. Kind of stupid. It's reported that George Michael was so annoyed that he insisted that no other copies be sent to any BBC stations. But get this, even with the song's widespread blacklisted status, it still went to number 2 on the Hot 100. And it went to number 1 on the US dance chart. Internationally, it hit number 3 in the UK, number 2 in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and number 1 in the Netherlands, Ireland, and Belgium. It was a global smash. But the controversy didn't stop at radio. The music video featuring George Michael's then-girlfriend Kathy Jung, that really started turning heads. Directed by Andy Morahan and Michael himself, the clip featured Kathy as the center of a fantasy, and there wasn't much left to the imagination. Intercut with the bedroom scenes are shots of George Michael breaking it down with some killer 80s dance moves, but this was also in 1987 when AIDS was still poorly understood by the general public and fear was widespread. Everything that seemed to overtly celebrate SEX felt, to many, to be deeply irresponsible. But here's the thing. I mean, George Michael, his intent wasn't meant to promote promiscuity, but, making love within a committed monogamous relationship. I mean, in the video, you can see George Michael paint the word monogamy on Kathy's back. And the video itself ends with the on-screen message, explore monogamy. So it was actually safe. Still, critics were so alarmed and MTV faced such intense pressure that they required George Michael to issue a public disclaimer for the video. Said George Michael, and I quote, "The media has divided love and SEX incredibly. The emphasis of the AIDS campaign has been on safe SEX, but the campaign has missed relationships. It's missed emotion. It's missed monogamy. The song is about attaching lust to love, not just to strangers." Of course, all the outrage was exactly what George wanted. It was brilliant publicity for him as he was actively trying to shed that boy band past. When George Michael's album Faith was released later that year, it went straight to #1 of the Billboard 200, and of course a lot of other countries. It would ultimately tally over 25 million albums sold around the world with 5, count them, 5 #1 hits. So there you have it. Our latest edition of Taboo Songs. What do you think about the ridiculousness of censorship? Let's talk about it below. What are your memories of these songs? What other songs should we cover on here? If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.